Hello everyone, this is Joshua Smith of Apollo's Artifacts. Today we'll be taking a look at some issues related to neuroscience. Now I've covered neuroscience topics before in relation to intelligence, IQ, or G. I have an idea for this episode and another one that may follow this. The first one would be about hemispheric differences between so-called left brain thinking and right brain thinking, to investigate whether or not it is true that there is this sort of separation that you hear people commonly reference. The other would be about sex or gender differences for how minds work, whether they tend to be more male dominant or female dominant, which is extraordinarily controversial at the moment. So in order to sort out whether or not this is true or if it is a mere modern myth, I wanted to take a look at an article. This is from the Center for Educational Neuroscience, University College London. It's titled, Left Brain versus Right Brain Thinkers. What are the two brains believed to do? This is an idea of two halves, pun intended. Firstly, that there is a difference between left brain thinking and right brain thinking. And secondly, that individuals differ in the extent to which they favor either the left brain or the right brain. According to this view, the left brain is the analytical, logical, verbal half, while the right brain is the creative, emotional, visuospatial half. Individuals who have one side more active than the other are believed to show corresponding cognitive styles and personalities. Is this true or false? As with most ideas in this series, there is a certain degree of truth here. Looking at the gross anatomy of the brain, one of the most striking features is that there are two very distinct hemispheres, which are joined together by a tract of connective tissue called the corpus callosum. There is also substantial regional specialization, and in many cases processing is partly or even fully hosted by one hemisphere. This lateralization or hemispheric specialization was first seen in the mid-19th century through the observation of the behavior of brain-damaged patients who were later autopsied. From the 1970s, this idea was explored by behavioral experimentation on patients with severed corpus callosums. Only recently, with the use of neuroimaging, have researchers been able to trace the structure and function of lateralization, as well as understand how the hemispheres work together and how their interaction changes over the lifespan. The evidence on brain lateralization. Meta-analyses which combine findings across multiple studies have shown that on the whole, language is lateralized to the left hemisphere, and visual spatial processing is lateralized to the right. Creativity also seems to be right dominant, possibly due to a dependence on creative thinking on global processing and taking context into account. However, even language is not exclusively left-brained. Only processing the sounds of words, phonological processing, seems to depend exclusively on the left hemisphere, with the right being important in things like understanding the meaning and context of language, and aspects of speech such as intonation. In reality, for most tasks, the two hemispheres work in tandem. Does lateralization differ between individuals? It is also true that lateralization differs between individuals. Individuals vary both in structural lateralization, the extent to which brain tissue is different in each hemisphere, and functional lateralization, the extent to which activity is different across hemispheres. Handedness is an obvious example. However, people don't show a general dominance of one or other hemisphere. In 2013, a large study was conducted at the University of Utah, where they analyzed brain scans from over 1,000 individuals while at rest. The team found some lateralization in regions associated with different tasks, those associated with language in the left and with controlling attention in the right. However, they found no evidence to support the notion that people are intrinsically left or right-sided in how their brains are wired. The implication of the left-right brain myth is that some people are better than others or more suited than others to certain tasks as a consequence of brain structure. This is not true. Degree of lateralization only relates to behavior in very specific areas. For example, degree of behavioral handedness is related to degree of lateralization of the area of the brain that controls the hand. In the classroom, the left brain, right brain myth has resulted in the development of the whole brain learning approach, which involves trying to balance processing in the two hemispheres by including both analytical and creative aspects in a task. In a way, this is all very well, as varying teaching methods may keep students attending longer, providing more opportunities to learn material, but the approach is not based on good science. The verdict? Definitely a narrow myth, even though its origins are clear. And I will link that article below so that you can check out it and the sources that they cite as well. I have another article on this from Medical News Today titled Left Brain versus Right Brain Fact and Fiction by Lana Burgess. It was reviewed Monday, the 26th of February 2018 by Daniel Morrell, MD. Overview: Left versus right studies functions of each hemisphere, the differences between people. The two hemispheres or sides of the brain have slightly different jobs, but can one side be dominant, and does this affect personality? Some people believe that a person is either left-brained or right-brained and that this determines the way they think and behave. In this article, we explore the truth and fallacy behind this claim. The brain is a complex and hard-working organism made up of as many as 100 billion neurons or brain cells, but only weighs around 3 pounds. It is an energy-intensive organ making up around 2% of a person's body weight, but uses a huge 20% of the body's energy. The left and right sides of the brain are connected by a great number of nerve fibers. In a healthy brain, the two sides communicate with one another. The two sides do not necessarily have to communicate, though. If a person has an injury that separates the two brain hemispheres, they are still able to function relatively normally. According to the left brain versus right brain belief, everyone has one side of their brain that is dominant and determines their personality, thoughts, and behavior. Because people can be left-handed or right-handed, the idea that people can be left-brained or right-brained is indeed tempting. Left-brained people are said to be more analytical, logical, detail and fact-oriented, numerical, and likely to think in words. Right-brained people are said to be more creative, free-thinking, able to see the big picture, intuitive, likely to visualize more than to think in terms of words. What does the research have to say about this? Recent research suggests that the left brain versus right brain theory is not correct. A 2013 study looked at 3D pictures of over 1,000 people's brains. They measured the activity of the left and right hemispheres using an MRI scanner. The results show that a person uses both hemispheres of the brain and that there does not seem to be a dominant side. However, a person's brain activity does differ depending on which task they are performing. For example, a study in PLOS biology says that the language centers of the brain are in the left hemisphere, while the right hemisphere is specialized for emotion and nonverbal communication. Contributions towards this brain lateralization research won Roger Sperry the Nobel Prize in 1960. However, popular cultural exaggeration of these findings led to the development of beliefs of left brain and right brain personality types. So among the hemispheric differences, you have emotion. This is the domain of the right brain in both humans and also in non-human primates. Emotions are expressed and recognized in others by the right brain. Language. The left brain is more active in speech production than the right. In most people, the two main language areas, known as Broca's area and Wernicke's area, are found in the left hemisphere. Sign language. Visually based languages are also the domain of the left brain. People who are deaf show speech-like brain activity when watching sign language. Handedness. Left and right-handed people use the left and right brain differently. For example, a left-handed person uses their right brain for manual tasks and vice versa. Handedness is inbuilt, and it can even be detected while the baby is in the womb. Some babies prefer to suck their left or right thumb from as early as 15 weeks. Attention. The two brain hemispheres also differ in what they pay attention to. The left side of the brain is more involved with attention to the internal world. The right side is more interested in attending to the external world. Recent brain imaging studies have shown no differences between males and females in terms of their brain lateralization. Does hemispheric dominance differ between people? The side of the brain used in each activity is not the same for every person. The side of the brain that gets used for certain activities may be influenced by whether a person is left or right-handed. A 2014 study notes that up to 99% of right-handed individuals have the language centers in the left of the brain, but so do about 70% of left-handed individuals. Hemispheric dominance varies from person to person and with different activities. More research is needed for science to fully understand all of the factors that affect this. The theory that a person is either left-brained or right-brained is not supported by scientific research. Some people may find that the theory does align with their aptitudes, however, they should not rely on it as a scientifically accurate way to understand the brain. The left brain versus right brain personality belief may have lasted so long because, in reality, brain activity is not symmetrical, and it does vary indeed from person to person. I have another article here from Robert Schmerling, MD, the faculty editor of Harvard Health Publications, called Right Brain / Left Brain, Right? ? I will link that. I'm not going to read from it, but it supports much of the same notion of what I have covered in the previous two. But it does add a few things about the cultural aspect of it that have not been covered so far, but I don't think I particularly need to read that. Another one in a similar vein that I'll also link below but not read from, by Christopher Berglund from Psychology Today. Left Brain, Right Brain study debunks a decades-old neuromyth, and he provides some additional evidence for why this brain lateralization problem has been so confused by the public at large. However, the final one that I actually will read some from is by a Christian Jarrett. It's called Why the Left Brain, Right Brain Myth Will Probably Never Die. The myth has become a powerful metaphor, but it's one that we should challenge. This is from June of 2012. Jarrett is the editor of the British Psychological Society's Research Digest and a staff writer for The Psychologist. The left brain, right brain myth will probably never die because it has become a powerful metaphor for different ways of thinking. Logical, focused, and analytic versus broad-minded and creative. Take the example of Britain's chief rabbi Jonathan Sacks talking on BBC Radio 4 earlier this year. As he said, quote, "What made Europe happen and made it so creative," he explained, "is that Christianity was a right-brain religion, translated into a left-brain language, Greek. So for many centuries you had this view that science and religion are essentially part of the same thing." As well as having metaphorical appeal, this seductive idea of the right brain and its untapped creative potential also has a long history of being targeted by self-help gurus peddling pseudo-psychology. Today, the same idea is also picked up by the makers of self-improvement video games and apps. The latest version of the Faces I Make Right Brain Creativity app for the iPad, for example, boasts that it is, quote, "an extraordinary tool for developing right brain creative capabilities." There is more than a grain of truth to the left brain, right brain myth. While they look alike, the two hemispheres of the brain do function differently. For example, it's become almost common knowledge that in most people the left brain is dominant for language, the right hemisphere, on the other hand, implicated more strongly in emotional processing and representing the mental states of others. However, the distinctions aren't as clear-cut as the myth makes out. For instance, the right hemisphere is involved in processing some aspects of language, such as intonation and emphasis. He goes on to say here that one of the most fascinating insights from the split brain studies was the way the left hemisphere made up stories to explain what the right hemisphere was up to, what Gazzaniga dubbed the interpreter phenomenon. For example, in one study, a patient completing a picture-making task used their left hand, controlled by the right hemisphere, to match up a shovel with an image of a snowstorm shown only to the right hemisphere. The patient was then asked why he had done this, but his left hemisphere, the source of speech, didn't admit to not knowing. Instead, it confabulated, saying that he had reached for the shovel to clear out the chicken coop. The picture shown to the left hemisphere was of a bird's foot. Writing an overview of the split brain research in a 2002 article for Scientific American, Gazzaniga concluded, based on the interpreter phenomenon and other findings, that the left hemisphere is inventive and interpreting, whilst the right brain is truthful and literal. This seems at odds with the myth invoked by Rabbi Sacks and many others. I suppose the logical left brain creative right brain myth has a seductive simplicity about it. People can ask, which kind of brain have I got? They can buy an app to target their weaker half. They can categorize languages and people as right-brained or left. It's tricky to combat that belief system by saying the truth is really more complicated, but it's worth trying because it would be a shame if the simplistic myth drowned out the more fascinating story of how our brains really work. So I thought that was some interesting food for thought, and we'll move from the left brain, right brain, which we now know to be a myth, to the concept of gendered brains, male versus female, so on and so forth, and we'll see what the latest scientific data has to say about that. That'll be all for today. Please subscribe, like, share, and all of those things. Thank you.